I served breakfast. My son-in-law threw it into the trash can and shouted, "This is disgusting. What are you even good for, old woman?" My daughter just laughed. I silently cleared the table. The porcelain plate hit the bottom of the metal trash can with a dull thud, and that sound rang louder in my ears than a slap across the face. My name is Ketta Vance. I am 74 years old, and once upon a time, I opened the most famous bakery in the heart of downtown. Now they look at me like I am old, useless junk. But for some reason, they forget whose hands needed the fortune they are so happily burning through. At 5 in the morning, my hands are already awake. It is a habit that neither retirement nor arthritis could ever beat out of me. 40 years of rising before the sun to light the ovens at Vance's Southern Sweets. That kind of life imprints itself on your soul in a way you can't wash off just by sleeping in. I got up quietly, making sure my warm house slippers didn't shuffle on the marble floor of this apartment. The apartment is in my name, but it hasn't felt like mine for a long time. I went to the kitchen. I love this moment when the city isn't growling yet. When there are only rare cars outside the window and inside the house, you can only hear the steady hum of the refrigerator. I took eggs, ripe tomatoes, onions, and a block of aged cheddar, which my late husband Otis loved so much, out of the fridge. I wanted to cook something special. Today is Saturday, and out of my old naive habit, I thought a good breakfast might soften the sour faces and dramatic sighs they have been serving me instead of a good morning. For the last few months, I made my signature country-style scramble with gravy slowly on low heat, the way it's supposed to be done, not the way my daughter Briana does it. She is always grabbing some store-bought sauces from a packet just to avoid the work. The smell of frying onions, tomatoes, and spices filled the kitchen. It smelled like home, like family, like the times when people sat at this table, not consumers. I set the table, laid out the linen napkins, poured fresh squeezed orange juice into glasses, and put a pot of hot coffee with cinnamon on the trivet. Everything stood straight, beautiful, just like I used to do in my bakery. At 9 o'clock sharp, as if by alarm, my son-in-law Derek dragged himself into the kitchen in a silk robe that looks ridiculous on him with his phone grafted to his hand. He was yelling into the receiver about some urgent project which I am sure will also fail. Derek is a man of images. Expensive suits, shiny watches, loud words, but inside it is empty. He silently sat at the head of the table. My seat. He didn't even bother to squeeze out a hello. A little later, Briana shuffled in. My daughter. Her face was washed, but her mood was absent. Brows furrowed, finger furiously tapping on her phone screen. "Good morning, baby girl," I said, trying to make my voice sound cheerful. She exhaled, not even looking up. I started placing plates in front of them. My hands trembled slightly when I set the dish before Derek, not from weakness, but from that familiar tension of trying to please people who decided long ago that you are a burden. Derek finished his conversation, threw the phone on the table, looked at the plate, and wrinkled his nose as if I had brought him slop. "What is this?" He poked the yolk with his fork cautiously, as if a cockroach were lying there. "It's my country scramble, Derek," I answered calmly. "You used to eat it by the pound when you came courting Briana. Remember?" He took a piece, chewed lazily once, twice, and made a face as if he had swallowed poison. He spit it into the linen napkin, pushed his chair back abruptly, grabbed the full plate, and walked with wide strides to the steel bin with the lid in the corner of the kitchen. "This is impossible to eat," he yelled, and dumped everything into the trash. The sound of the plate and fork hitting the metal bottom was the sound of my dignity being thrown in right after it. "It smells like rancid grease. What are you even good for, old woman? You can't even cook like a human being anymore," he threw in my face. I felt the heat rising up my neck, not from shame but from an old, deep anger. I looked at my daughter. I waited honestly for at least one word, even a weak one. "Don't talk to my mother like that." Briana gave a dry, mean chuckle. "Oh, Mama, honestly, your taste isn't the same anymore. Leave the kitchen alone. Let the housekeeper cook. You just get in the way and dirty everything up. Go sit down and stop causing these disasters." I stood with a kitchen towel in my hands. I didn't cry. I ran out of tears for them a long time ago. I silently walked to the bin, bent down, feeling my knees crunch, and took out the plate. With a paper towel, I wiped the gravy that had splashed on the rim of the bin and on the floor. "That's right. Clean it up," Derek snorted, returning to the table and pouring himself coffee with the look of a master of life. At least you can still do something, even if you are slow. Briana didn't even lift her head. She was already aiming her camera at her mug to take a beautiful shot for her story. As if they had a perfect Saturday morning in a loving family here. I went to my corner, a small room that used to be a storage closet, which they fixed up for me when I sold my big house and used that money to buy them this luxurious apartment downtown. We'll all be together, Mama, they said. We'll take care of you. What a lie. They dragged me here to babysit the grandkids while they were small, and then I became a living guarantor for their whims. I sat on the edge of the narrow bed. My hands smelled of onions and soap. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and remembered who I was. I am Ketta Vance, the woman who started with pies in a basket and worked her way up to employing 50 families. I am the one who bargained with the toughest suppliers at the wholesale depots, counted every penny, and never allowed myself to be humiliated in my own business. At what moment did I turn into an old stool that just gets in the way in the kitchen? The answer lay on the small desk in front of me. There, hidden under a stack of knitting magazines, was my black leather ledger. I opened it. Inside were the bank statements that arrived yesterday. I intercepted the mailman before the concierge could call up to the apartment. For years, I allowed them to manage the checking account so I wouldn't have to run around for small things myself. But one account I never gave up. The main one, the source everything feeds from. Derek considers himself a financial genius, but for the last few months he has just been slowly bleeding my savings dry, wasting them on stupid investments and luxury trips. He is sure the money is infinite, and the old woman doesn't understand anything anymore. I glanced at the last transaction. This morning Derek tried to make a large transfer. I didn't even doubt it. Either another one of his debts or a new unnecessary car. He did it, of course, from his phone, not hesitating for a second. But yesterday, after they yelled at me for ironing his shirt wrong, I just took my cane, called the elevator, and walked 3 blocks to the bank branch. I walked into the lobby, sat on a chair, and asked to see the manager, Mr. Henderson. He has known me for 30 years since I opened the first account for the bakery. Mrs. Vance, he said, sliding a cup of real fresh coffee toward me. Not the instant nonsense they drink here at home. How can I help you? What I did yesterday was simple but final. I removed their signatures from all my accounts, froze the supplementary cards, and most importantly, put a voice confirmation requirement on all large transactions. Now without my yes, not a single sum over $500 is going anywhere. My thoughts returned to my little room. Laughter from Derek and Briana drifted in from the dining room. They were laughing at me, at my food, at my age. Old useless thing. Derek's voice floated in. We need to seriously think about a nursing home, Briana. She gets on my nerves shuffling around here. I know, my daughter answered. But normal private homes cost crazy money. Let her stick around here. At least we save on a cleaning lady. My heart went cold. It wasn't just a lack of love. It was cold calculation. They looked at me like an asset that was depreciating, a thing to be used to the end and then thrown away. I looked at the clock on the nightstand. Exactly 1 hour had passed since that breakfast. Just enough time for the banking system to process all my changes from yesterday. At that moment, Derek's phone started singing. He has this nasty trendy ringtone that hits you like a hammer. I stood up, smoothed the hem of my house dress, and looked in the mirror. In the reflection, the beaten-down old woman wiping gravy from the floor wasn't looking back at me anymore. The Ketta Vance who used to chase thieves out of her bakery was looking back. I put on lipstick, gathered my white hair into a neat bun, and opened the door. Slowly, without rushing, I walked down the hallway and stood in the doorway of the dining room. Briana looked at me with open irritation. Mama, why did you come out again? We said stay in your room. I didn't answer. I just looked straight at Derek. Yes, it's me. He was saying into the phone at first with that same smug tone. How is the transaction declined? That can't be. I have sufficient funds there. I am a premium client. What do you mean suspicion of fraud? I made the transfer myself. What do you mean? The account owner revoked authorization. What owner? My mother-in-law doesn't even know how to use an ATM. You have a system error. Briana looked up from her phone. The word owner sobered her up. Derek, what happened? She asked already with a note of fear. Derek listened to what they were telling him in the receiver. His free hand started shaking just like my hand shook this morning when I put the plate in front of him. Only he was shaking from panic. An hour? He squeezed out. All joint accounts were blocked an hour ago. He slowly lowered the phone. The screen was still glowing. He looked at me. This time he really saw me. He saw my clear eyes looking straight into his. He saw that I wasn't stooping. He saw that the useless old woman was standing before him, straight as an oak tree. I walked to the table. Derek's dirty plate was still sitting on the tablecloth, stained with coffee. "Briana, pour me a cup of coffee," I said in the voice I used to give orders with in the hot kitchen. "And you, Derek, sit down. We need to talk about finances." Derek opened his mouth, either to yell or to insult me again, but the sound got stuck in his throat when he saw that cold smile slowly appear on my face. Since the moment he threw my food in the trash, a lot had changed. They just realized that the broken ATM had suddenly changed its PIN code. I sat at the head of the table in my spot, folded my hands on the tabletop, and calmly looked at them, waiting to see if they had the courage to ask again what I was needed for. A heavy silence hung in the air. Not a morning silence, but tight like a live wire. They didn't know yet that this was just the first domino I had pushed. Briana brought the coffee. Her hands with the perpetual French manicure costing hundreds of dollars were shaking so much that the black liquid splashed onto the white saucer. I said nothing, just watched the brown stain spread over the porcelain just as fear was spreading over Derek's face. "Here, Mama," she mumbled, not daring to look me in the eye. I took the cup calmly. The first sip was bitter. She hadn't even put sugar in, but it tasted like a reward. It was the taste of control returning to me. Derek was still poking his finger at the phone screen as if the force of the press could unlock the banking app. "I don't understand anything," he muttered. "It says access denied. It says contact the account owner, but I have power of attorney. I handle all this." I wiped the corner of my lips with a cloth napkin. "Power of attorney, Derek," I said quietly, "is to represent me, not to live instead of me. And powers of attorney can be revoked. It's a very simple process. A couple of signatures and that's it." Derek shot his eyes up at me. Terror was darting around in them. Do you understand what you've done?" he whispered. And then his voice went up into a breaking squeal. "Mrs. Vance, do you understand what's going to happen now? I have checks written. I have car payments. If all these charges don't go through, they'll ruin my credit history. They'll put me on a blacklist." "That means you'll have to learn to walk," I answered calmly. "Or take the bus. I hear it's very fast this time of day, son." I stood up from the table. Even an hour ago, my legs felt like lead from humiliation. Now they felt strong like when I was 50. I left my daughter with her mouth open and my son-in-law on the verge of hysteria in the dining room. Walked to my room, closed the door, and turned the latch. That quiet metallic click was the most pleasant sound all morning. I sat back at my desk. My heart wasn't beating like an old woman's, but like a boss who had finally remembered whose kitchen this was. Anyway, I turned on the desk lamp, an old one with a green shade that I brought from the old house, even though Derek kept insisting it didn't fit the interior. Soft light fell on the table, on the stack of magazines, and my black leather ledger. I pulled it toward me and opened it, not at the recent pages but deeper. Under the fresh statements lay a thick envelope sealed many years ago. I carefully tore the edge. The smell of old paper and ink hit my nose as if someone had opened a door to my past life. Here it was, my real arsenal, not just money in the bank. The history of how that money appeared. A history Derek and Briana have no idea about. I spread the papers on the bedspread. First, an old yellowed copy of the deed to the building downtown where Vance's Southern Suites used to be. 10 years ago, when I sold the brand itself to a large chain, Derek was almost jumping for joy. "Sell everything, Mama," he kept saying, rubbing his hands together. "Real estate is a headache. Cash is better, and then I'll invest it all smartly." Smart. He thought he was. I sold the brand, the recipes, the equipment, but I kept the building. Derek still believes that the money coming in every month from rent is some kind of government pension. He has no idea that the trendy restaurant sitting there now pays me rent that is 3 times larger than the salary he loves to brag about. Next to the deed, I placed my thick blue notebook with a hard cover. Not a banking one. Here were names, not just numbers. Names of people I helped when no one else wanted to think about them. Trayvon, the one who is a notary now. I paid for his law school when his father died at my bakery, falling from a ladder. Dr. Sophia Lewis, now the head doctor at a private clinic. Her mother worked for me as a confectioner for many years. The woman had golden hands. Captain Briggs. Back then, a young police officer who stood at my door in the frost eating my hot biscuits for free because they had an empty pot at home. Derek and Briana think power is the number of followers on a phone and the limit on a credit card. Pathetic children. Real power is people who remember how you helped them when they had nothing and whom you looked in the eye not from above but as a human being. I turned a few pages. The last 5 years had neat entries in small handwriting. Since I moved into this glass palace downtown, I started keeping another set of books. First it was small things. Dinner at a restaurant, a jacket, something for the house. I closed my eyes, thinking this was the price for not being alone, for having family nearby. And then the trip started. Mama won't fly. It's hard for her. Upgrading cars every year. Jewelry for Briana. It's costume jewelry, Mama. Pennies. I ran my finger down the right column where the sums were. Then I took a calculator. I've counted in my head my whole life. But when strangers' hands are in your pocket, it's better to count twice. I pressed a few buttons. The figure on the screen flicked painfully against my nerves. Almost. $400,000 over 3 years. $400,000 worth of my early mornings. My burns from baking sheets. My negotiations with suppliers. And in return I received screaming, contempt, and breakfast in a trash can. I took off my glasses and rubbed my eyes. How did you let it get to this, Ketta? I asked myself aloud. Where were you all this time? When my husband, Otis, died, it felt like half my body had been cut off. I walked like a stranger in my own apartment. Briana saw this, sensed my weakness. Move in with us, Mama, she urged. Why be alone in that house? We'll take care of you. We'll all be together. And I agreed with my heart in tatters. I gave them the keys to my life, confident that I would receive love in return. Like a child, honest to God, I looked at my hands. Age spots, swollen knuckles, skin thin like cigarette paper. But these are the same hands that sorted sacks of flour, kneaded dough at night, signed contracts with serious men whose eyes were colder than a freezer. I remembered one day 20 years ago, some sly inspector came to my bakery, hinted that he found violations, and if I didn't give him an envelope, he would shut me down. I took a broom and swept him out of the store in front of the customers. People even applauded that day. I felt like a lioness. Where did I put that lioness? Later, I put her to sleep myself so as not to bother the children's lives, so as not to be that difficult mother-in-law, so Briana would love me. Every time Eric yelled at me, and I stayed silent, I gave him permission. Every time Briana pretended she didn't see me, and I smiled in return, I pushed her even further. I raised these two parasites. I fed them not only with money but with my softness. But when I saw my food in the bucket mixed with peels, my illusions lay there with it. There in the trash can the convenient mama died. To them, I am not a mother or a mother-in-law. I am an ATM on legs, and an ATM isn't supposed to feel, think, and certainly not open its mouth. I walked to the full-length mirror hanging behind my door. I looked at myself. House dress clean but faded. Old bun on the back of my head. Face without makeup. That's it, I told my reflection. Enough. The useless old woman is gone. Voices drifted in from the hallway. I walked to the door and pressed my ear against it. It can't be legal, Derek was saying excitedly. She has a senile brain. We can challenge this. We'll draw up a paper saying she has dementia. We'll find a doctor who will sign the conclusion for money. We'll get control of the accounts back. I don't know, Derek. Briana's voice was trembling. You saw her today. She didn't look crazy. She looked different. And if we do that, who will pay our cards this month? That is exactly why we need to hurry. He wouldn't let up. Now I'll go to her, play the victim. I'll say I was on edge, that I flared up this morning, that it's stress. Forgive me. I love you. You cry next to me. Say the grandkids miss her even though they haven't given a damn about her for a long time. She's soft. She always falls for the family theme. I moved away from the door and smirked. Soft? You say? A sweet bun? In their opinion. They forgot one thing. If you leave a bun in the oven too long, it turns into a rock. And I've been in my oven for many years. I went back to the table. I needed a plan not based on emotions but cold logic. Throwing them out the door right now. Sure, I could do that. The apartment is in my name, but Derek is a leech. He'd lock himself in 'cause a scandal, maybe steal something quietly, and the laws are complex. Everything needs to be done carefully with papers. I needed to cut off their air, money slowly without hysterics so they would start suffocating from their own greed. I took a clean sheet of paper and took out Otis's fountain pen. The black ink lay on the paper smoothly without blots. Step 1: Legal protection. My will needs to be updated immediately. If something happens to me and after what I overheard, I wasn't ruling anything out. Everything goes to them. That cannot be allowed. Step 2: The audit. Derek claims he invests my money. Let him show the papers, stocks, funds, contracts. I know there is emptiness there, but I want to see his face when a notary is sitting next to him. Step 3: The diet. The free ride is over. If they want to live like in a commercial, let them pay for it themselves. I will cover only what keeps the house from collapsing. Lights, water, gas. No choffers, security guards, clubs, spas, or other tinsel. I opened the blue notebook to the right page, found Traven's number, and dialed it on the landline. I still don't trust their smart devices for serious business. Yes, listening. A familiar low voice answered almost immediately. Traven, it's Ketta Vance, I said. From the bakery. There was a pause on the other end, and then the voice became softer but serious. Mrs. Vance, what a surprise. How are you? Do you need me to bring you some biscuits? He tried to joke a little. I can bake biscuits myself, son, I answered. I don't need sugar. I need sharp teeth. I need a lawyer and a good one. He switched gears immediately. Speak. I am all ears. I need you to come to my house today, but not as a familiar boy, but as my official representative. Bring everything needed to revoke powers of attorney, rewrite a will, and most importantly, I paused, start an audit of all transactions on my personal accounts for the last 5 years, the toughest one possible. Silence reigned on the other end for a second again. An audit for 5 years, Mrs. Vance, that is serious. That means you suspect fraud or direct theft. We are talking about my son-in-law and my daughter Traven, I answered calmly. And about $400,000. Is that enough for you? I understand, he said seriously. I will be there in 2 hours. And please do not sign anything until I arrive. No papers, not even a receipt from the dry cleaner. Don't worry, son. I chuckled. Now I read even the fine print on advertisements twice. I hung up. My heart was beating fast but steadily. I looked at the clock. It was 11. Derek had just said he would come to apologize. Well, let him come. I went to the closet, took out not my old house dress, but that same gray suit I wore to the Chamber of Commerce meetings. Strict jacket, skirt below the knee, dark blue silk blouse, low-heeled shoes, comfortable but not slippers. I changed slowly. The house dress, smelling of the kitchen and resentment, went onto the chair. I buttoned the jacket slowly as if putting on armor, smoothed my hair with a comb, gathered it into a high, neat bun, took pearl earrings from the jewelry box. Otis's gift for our silver wedding anniversary. Looked in the mirror one more time. Standing before me was not a grandmother waiting for change, but an owner, a matriarch, as smart people on TV like to say. There was a cautious knock at the door. Mama! Derek drawled in a sweet voice. May I? I brought you some chamomile tea for your nerves. I smiled, not from tenderness, but the way a cat smiles when a mouse climbs into its hole on its own. I walked decisively to the door and threw it open so abruptly that Derek flinched. The cup on the saucer rattled in his hands. A fake smile froze on his face. His gaze slid from my styled hair to the gray suit to the earrings and stopped on my eyes. He instinctively took a step back. I don't need tea, Derek, I said in a voice that demanded no repetition. And save your sticky apologies for someone else. Go gather all the papers on your investments instead. I paused and added, at 1 o'clock my lawyer is coming. If even 1 penny doesn't add up, you will be drinking tea not here but at the police station. Derek went so pale that even the reddish stubble on his face looked brighter than his skin. He looked as if the rug had been pulled out from under his feet. The war had begun, and for the first time in many years, the army was on my side. The doorbell rang as evenly as if I had ordered it by schedule. A normal day for a luxury building, but for Derek it sounded like a funeral bell. He stood in the hallway with that same cup of chamomile tea, having decided neither to sip nor to give it away, froze pale. "I'll get it," I said, walking past him, not even touching him. My voice was calm, like in the days when I gave the command to turn on all the ovens at once before the holidays. I walked to the heavy front door and threw it open. On the threshold stood Trayvon Mercer, no longer the skinny boy in a worn jacket who used to sweep my warehouse, but a solid man of about 50, strong, neat, in a dark blue suit with a leather briefcase, rattling not only with paper but with the law. "Mrs. Vance," he slightly tilted his head, took off his dark hat, just like his father used to do. "At your service." "Come in, son," I answered. "Thank you for being so quick." Trayvon stepped over the threshold. His presence immediately leveled out the air in the hallway. Derek, seeing him, immediately pulled a wide, friendly smile onto his face and extended his hand. "Oh, Mr. Mercer, what a surprise," he babbled. "We didn't know you were coming. Mama, you really are something. Didn't say anything at all. She has trouble with memory, you know." Trayvon didn't even look at his hand, just turned to me. "Where is it more convenient to work, Mrs. Vance? In your study or in the dining room?" "In the dining room, Trayvon," I said, looking straight at Derek. "There is more space there. We'll have to sort through a lot of trash." We went into the dining room, the same expensive wood tabletop that had been the stage for my humiliation this morning. Now daylight fell on it from the panoramic windows, highlighting the crumbs of their anger and greed. Briana sat at the table with red eyes, not from remorse, but because half an hour before this, her internet shopping had been cut off. Seeing Trayvon, she immediately straightened up, fixed her hair, tried to smile. "Hello, Anthony. I mean, Trayvon, are you joining us for lunch?" She sang in the tone she used to use to hook waiters in restaurants. "We will honestly have a small incident in the kitchen today. I came to work, Mrs. Hollingsworth." Trayvon cut her off dryly. I sat in my place at the head of the table. Trayvon sat on the right side, opened his briefcase, took out a laptop, 2 thick folders, and a small voice recorder. Clicked a button. A red recording light lit up. Derek flopped onto the chair opposite, already without his theatrical smile. Briana settled next to him, squeezing a napkin in her hand so hard her fingers turned white. So I said, interlacing my fingers on the table, "Trayvon, please explain to my relatives why you are here." He adjusted his glasses, opened the first folder. "On behalf of my client, Mrs. Ketta Vance," he began in an even business tone, "a full audit of her assets is being conducted. This includes but is not limited to bank accounts, deposits, investment products, real estate, and vehicles registered to her or purchased with her funds." Derek snorted nervously. "Well, full audit is a big word." He tried to turn everything into a joke. "I'm just helping Mama. She doesn't understand anything in your internet banks. I was investing her money profitably all this time. My strategy is crypto futures." "What Mrs. Vance understands perfectly well," Derek said. Trayvon, not looking up from the papers, "is that over the last 2 years about $430,000 have disappeared under the guise of representative expenses and risky investments." Briana sucked in air convulsively. Derek turned red, then pale. That is investments," he yelled, slamming his palm on the table. "Any businessman will confirm. It's a temporary minus. The market dipped." "The market didn't dip, Derek," I said calmly, opening my blue notebook and sliding it to the middle of the table. "You dipped into my account. Everything is recorded here. Trips to Vegas casinos. While I was babysitting the grandkids, upgrading the car every year, jewelry for Briana, which she called junk peanuts." Derek stared at the notebook like it was black magic. You were writing all this down," he squeezed out. "I'm not blind, Derek. And I'm not deaf. I was just tired. But my vacation ended this morning when you decided it was okay to throw my food in the trash." Silence hung in the room. You could only hear Trayvon breathing evenly. He turned a couple more pages, then raised his eyes. "From this moment," he pronounced distinctly, "all notarized powers of attorney issued by Ketta Vance in the name of Derek Hollingsworth and Briana Hollingsworth are revoked. Any attempt to perform a transaction on their behalf will be regarded as fraud. Here is the notification. Please sign for receipt." He placed 2 sheets and a cheap pen before them. He left his expensive one next to me. Derek grabbed the paper, ran his eyes over it, and started up. This is called stripping us of everything. It says here, we are obligated to surrender keys to vehicles. The car is my working tool, by the way. What kind of work, Derek? I looked at him calmly. Trips to the golf club by 11 a.m. According to my records, that's where you drove that SUV most often. Briana, raising her voice, intervened. Mama, this is too much. Are you seriously wanting to leave us without cars? How will I go to fitness? How will I get to see my friends? You are just making fools of us. Are you going to sign? Asked Trayvon without looking at them. Or do you want me to call the bank right now in front of you and report an attempt to conceal embezzlement? Kick squeezed the pen so hard his knuckles turned white and signed with a sweeping crooked scrawl. Briana held out to the last, but seeing his signature, she also scribbled her name, dropping a couple of tears onto the paper. It didn't touch me. Their tears always turned on when there was a smell of losing comforts. Documents received, Trayvon said dryly, putting them in the folder. Now moving to Phase 2 lifestyle audit. Next began a 2-hour massacre, only without blood. Trayvon took printouts from the folder and I took out my notebook. We asked about expensive watches. Derek mumbled about profitable resale. Trayvon calmly read out that the watch was 2 years old and in the bank application it passed as a luxury item. We asked about his consultations. He tried to act smart with words he didn't really understand himself. Trayvon found 0 declarations and 0 official salary. It was like a school principal taking apart not a child but a man near 50 in expensive loafers. Briana tried to insert from time to time. But it's for status. Derek needs to match the level. He has a meeting. But under Trayvon's gaze, she quickly went quiet. By 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Derek's stomach growled loudly. The sound was such that I almost smirked myself. Briana looked at the clock and drawled in a pitiful voice. I want to eat. On Saturdays we usually order sushi. It's almost 3 o'clock. I rose slowly. My knees almost didn't hurt. Adrenaline is the best painkiller. There will be no sushi today, I said. And you don't have a cook anymore. According to your own words, I only get in the way in the kitchen, so I'm not going to cook. I went to the kitchen. They looked at my back like children left without dessert. I opened the cupboards, looked into the fridge. Almost everything decent they had already managed to eat during the week. I deliberately took out the simplest things. A box of cheap cereal, a loaf of white bread, a jar of mayonnaise, a couple of cucumbers. Put all this on the marble countertop. Here are your delicacies, I said without even looking at them. Hungry? Make sandwiches. Bread with mayonnaise never killed anyone. You're kidding, right? This is a joke. Derek looked at the loaf as if I had put nails on the table. Are we supposed to eat this like beggars? No, Derek. This is not a joke. This is reality. As long as you live under my roof and on my money, you will eat what I decide. Want pheasant? Go ahead. Earn it yourselves. Oh, sorry. You have temporary difficulties. I returned to the dining room. Trayvon looked at me with a slight smile and took 2 thermoses out of his briefcase. I allowed myself to bring something, Mrs. Vance, he said quietly. My wife cooked this morning. Knew it would be a tough day. He put plastic containers on the table. In one were hot hand pies. In the other a thick fragrant fruit punch. A warm homemade smell spread through the room. The kind that immediately makes a person's heart softer. A normal person's heart. Trayvon and I calmly served ourselves. I bit into a pie, felt the savory filling, the steam burning my lips. Delicious, I said aloud, not hiding my pleasure. Now this is real homemade taste. You can't buy this in any of your pretentious restaurants. Briana and Derek stood in the kitchen doorway, clutching a piece of bread each. Mayonnaise gleamed heavily on the white crumb. They chewed as if chewing cardboard. A drop ran down Briana's chin. Manicures do not predispose one to neatness. I stayed silent. There was no sweet joy in my soul. After all, they are mine. Some kind of family, but there was a sense of justice. Bitter as black coffee, no sugar. While Trayvon and I ate, Derek couldn't stand it and approached the table again, put his bread on a saucer, leaned on the tabletop. Mrs. Vance, let's talk like human beings, he started already without the previous arrogance. You understand? The morning turned out nervous. I flared up, freaked out. But you can't cut us off like this. I have obligations, deals. People are waiting. If I don't pay everything now, problems will start. You already have problems, I noted calmly, finishing my punch. You just got used to not noticing. He ran a hand nervously through his hair. These are not jokes, he hissed. There are people there, not banks. Understand? If I don't pay them back, they will come here. You don't want collectors shuffling around your apartment. Here I was truly surprised for the first time that day. So besides my account, he managed to get into debt elsewhere. Predatory loans apparently. Who else needs people like him? I carefully placed the cup on the saucer and looked at him more closely. Such people, you say, I draw. Now this, Derek, we will talk about separately. I already felt a new thought forming in my head. And if Derek thought today's mayonnaise sandwiches were the bottom, he was very mistaken. That was just the appetizer. I just noted to myself about his such people and decided not to press. Let it hang in the air. Sometimes fear works better if you give it a little time to brew. But the real show started not that day. On Monday, we were woken not by the smell of coffee, but by the savage ring of the intercom. No gentle melodies, a sharp trill like a siren. I got up, pulled on my warm wool cardigan, which Briana can't stand, says it smells like mothballs, and went out into the hallway. Derek was already there in just pajama pants, disheveled, face twisted, yelling into the intercom handset. I already told you you have no right to come up. This is private property. Leave immediately. Who is there, Derek? I leaned on my cane more for show than need lately. My legs hold themselves up fine. He turned around, eyes wild. The car, Mrs. Vance, they say they came for the car, for my car. They say 3 months overdue on the loan and they have full right to take it. You said you would pay for everything necessary. So I am paying, I answered calmly, and went to the kitchen to put water on. Paid the lights, water, gas, but your SUV with leather seats and heating that, doesn't fall under basic necessities. Derek tore from his spot, rushed to the window, yanked back the curtains. I walked over too. Below at the entrance stood a yellow tow truck. The amber light was flashing. Workers were already strapping chains to his shiny SUV. Briana tumbled out of the bedroom in her trendy robe with some green mask on her face, looking like peeling skin, and yelled, "What is that noise so early? What is happening, Mama?" "The carriage is turning into a pumpkin," I said, pouring tea into mugs. "They are coming for your bronze happiness on wheels." Derek, barefoot, rushed headlong downstairs. From below, his scream reached us. Threats, powerless cursing. The worker evidently had seen hundreds of such important people. Calmly clicked the locks. Lifted the car onto the platform, didn't even look at him. When Derek returned, he was no longer red, but gray, feet dusty, breathing heavy. They took it, he whispered, sinking onto the sofa. Right in front of the house, in front of the concierge, in front of the neighbors. That's it. I'm done. Don't be dramatic. I sat in the armchair with the teapot. It's a 10-minute walk to the subway. Bus is $2 on the corner. You won't die. The loss of the car was only the first bell. By 11, Derek's phone just went crazy. Not usual calls, but some short, sharp signals, one after another, like drops falling on the same spot. He looked at the screen and turned even paler. "It's them," he exhaled. "Those guys from Quick Cash, they text that if I don't make a payment by noon, they will come to deal with it personally. Briana, they aren't joking. It's not a bank." Briana pressed her hands to her face. "Personally? What does that mean? Will they break down our door? Will they touch us?" Derek was silent for a long time. Then, for the first time in many years, looked at me, not from above, but like a person who suddenly realized he has someone older and more experienced in his life. "Mrs. Vance," his voice trembled. "Please, the sum isn't that big." "Well, for you it isn't. You can pay and I will later." "Well, somehow." "How much?" I asked calmly. "Without somehow." 25,000. He lowered his head. "Plus penalties. But they are ready to write those off if I pay the principal debt." I thought I'd win it back. There were guaranteed bets. I would have returned almost everything. Briana howled. 25,000. "Derek, you said it was for the summer house, for investments in a country home." "Yes, that is an investment." He snapped. "They just haven't paid off yet." I sighed deeply to the very bottom of my lungs. An idiot, of course, but an idiot who is still legally connected to me. I got up, went to my room, and returned a minute later with the blue notebook and the home phone handset. Sat at the table, turned a couple of pages, found the needed number, and dialed it from memory. Yes, a familiar raspy voice answered. Is this Captain Briggs? I asked confidently. This is Ketta Vance. Remember Vance's Suites downtown? There was a pause on the other end, and then the voice warmed up, but remained with that same dangerous metallic tint. Mrs. Vance, of course I remember. How could I forget your biscuits? Did someone offend you? Say the address. I'll send a car right now. I don't need a car, I said. I need one favor. I know your brother-in-law moves in the microfinance circle. How is it there? Quick cash, those who like to remind personally. Derek almost choked on air. He seemingly thought his mother-in-law lived in a vacuum and didn't know what loan sharks were. There is such a thing, Briggs grunted. And so my son-in-law, Derek Hollingsworth, has a debt hanging on him. I want to buy out this debt right now with my personal funds, but with a condition. From your side, there are no more questions for him or this address. And from here on I will be the one dealing with him. Buy it out? He asked again. Mrs. Vance, trust my experience. Sometimes it's useful for such idiots to be scared a little. Brains turn on fast. I don't like washing blood out of carpets. I answered dryly. I have good parquet here. It's a pity. Let him fear me, not your guys. It will be calmer for you and for me. Briggs laughed quietly. All right. For the sake of those night biscuits you used to bring out to my cruiser when I was still walking a beat, consider the question closed from our side. Make the transfer. The debt is yours. And Hollingsworth. Well, you educate him yourself. Agreed. I said, thank you, son. I hung up. Silence hung in the room. Derek looked at me as if I had grown fangs and a tail. Briana like at a person she didn't know at all before. What? What did you just do? He squeezed out. Did you pay for me? I just saved your kneecaps' health, I answered, opening the blue notebook to a new page. But don't flatter yourself. I didn't do it out of love. Simply cheaper for me this way than paying for your medical treatment later. I neatly wrote down the date, the sum $25,000, and next to it wrote Derek's debt. Now listen to me. From this moment, Derek, I said, not looking up from the notebook, to those 400,000 plus that you and Briana pulled out of me over the last years, add another 25,000, and this is no longer family expenses. This is your personal debt to me. Derek opened his mouth, but there were no words. You have no car. You have no job on paper. You won't have a normal credit history either, I continued. So, you will pay with the only thing you have left, your hands. Briana, who until this had only gasped, suddenly fluttered up. Mama, but you are going too far. How can he use his hands? Derek has a master's in business administration. He won't carry bags. That is not his level. I smirked. A master who isn't capable of managing even his own wallet will work with his hands first, I said. And then maybe I will allow him to connect his head. I went to the hallway, opened the closet where I had old things from the bakery folded, and took out 2 thick, coarse aprons, heavy, made of dense fabric with dried stains of chocolate and cream. The cleaners at Vance's Suites used to scrub cauldrons in these. Returned and threw one apron onto Derek's knees. The second at Briana. The fabric landed with a slap like a sentence. Put them on, I said. What? Derek grabbed the apron with 2 fingers as if it were something filthy. I won't wear this. I am not a janitor. Consider yourself lucky you aren't a prisoner, I said calmly. Almost $500,000 hangs on you. You have a choice. Either you put on the apron and start working it off, or I call Briggs back and say I changed my mind. Then deal with your friends yourself without my carpets. 3. I raised a finger. 2. Derek flinched, jerked the apron over his head, and tangling the ties, somehow tightened them on his back. Briana stared for a second at him, then at me, then also silently stood up and tied hers. They looked funny. 2 spoiled adult children in work uniforms they previously only saw on people whose names they didn't even bother to remember. I walked around them like a shop foreman. Trayvon filed a new package of documents this morning, I said quietly, but so that every word cut into their memory. The apartment, the house downtown, my accounts. All this is now in a separate trust. If I suddenly accidentally fall down the stairs or mix up pills, the beneficiaries become a charity fund and a dog shelter. You get 0, not a penny, not a stool. Briana stopped breathing. You crossed us out completely, she whispered. We are nobody to you now. While I am alive, you are still my daughter and my son-in-law, I answered. But if something is done to me, I want to be sure that at least the homeless will benefit from it. But if you look after me normally, work slowly, return the debt, we'll see. Maybe I'll leave something. Maybe. I walked to the window and nodded toward the city center. The building downtown, by the way, requires care. Tenants complain that there is dampness in the basement and piled up trash. Tomorrow at 6 a.m. you too are going there. You will carry everything out, clean, throw away. At the same time, look at where your money came from. I am not a loader, Derek said hollowly. Although the apron already said otherwise, I won't haul trash. No, you are my debtor, I corrected him. And debtors, Derek, work where they are told and receive as much as they are owed. I returned to the table, took the calculator, and put it in front of him. Look, I said, average daily rate of an unskilled laborer is about $100. That's if you work hard all day without tricks and smoke breaks every 10 minutes. You have a debt of roughly $470,000. Divide one by the other. How many years comes out? He automatically reached for his phone, but it didn't unlock. His fingerprint evidently trembled, so the technology didn't recognize the master. I took back the calculator and pressed a few buttons myself. About 13 years, I said, doing the math in my head for U.S. wages versus the debt. If every day without weekends. Derek stared at the numbers as if they could reduce themselves. Briana sat quietly on the chair, pressing the edge of the apron to herself. So, Derek, I leaned toward him, if you want to manage to pay off in this lifetime, I advise you not to be late tomorrow at 6. Briana sat motionless, still looking at the calculator. Then she abruptly stood up and rushed to me, as she had done for many years when she wanted to wiggle out of something. Mama, she drawled pitifully, trying to hug me by the shoulders. But you aren't like this. You are kind. You are always for us. You love us. I gently removed her hands like brushing off a pestering fly. I love you, Briana, I said calmly. That is exactly why I am doing all this. I raised two adults who don't know how to work or answer for their actions. And if I don't sober you up now, life will kill you. Better you yell at me first. She recoiled as if I had hit her. For her, a refusal of a hug was worse than a slap. Let's start with the simple things. I turned to Derek. You will start paying me for your mess right now. I went to the kitchen. They trudged after me in aprons like two interns in a kitchen, only without the desire to learn. The sink was filled to the top with dishes from the evening, plates, pans, glasses. All this they usually either left until tomorrow or waited for it to resolve itself. That is for me to wash everything while they slept. I tapped my cane on the edge of the sink. Start right here, I said. I want everything to shine. Derek, watch out for the porcelain. If you break even one of my plates, we count it at triple price. Are you mocking me? He hissed. I am a grown man with a degree. I have to wash dishes. You can choose not to wash. I shrug. You can walk out of the apartment right now. The door isn't chained. Just note waiting for you outside aren't me with a rag. But such people you spoke about this morning, without a car, without money, with a ruined history. Let's see how much your degree is worth out there. He shifted his gaze to the door, then to his empty hands, then to the sink. His eyes filled with malice, but he still opened the tap. Water hit the plates. Spray immediately spotting his shirt. Briana took a sponge with 2 fingers like something nasty. Kill the manicure. Pay for it yourself, I threw out. Or cut your nails like all normal people who work with their hands. I poured myself more tea, sat in my armchair by the window so I could see them with peripheral vision. Heard the dishes clumsily clanking against each other. Derek muttering curses under his breath. Briana sniffling. It wasn't a joyful victory. No sane person dreams of seeing their own daughter in a greasy apron over a sink. But sometimes medicine is bitter, yet it cures. After some time, Derek couldn't stand it. Turned off the water, turned sharply to me, hands in suds, face red. This won't stay like this, he hissed. I will talk to lawyers. This is abuse, Mrs. Vance. You are abusing your age. I will sue. Say you are blackmailing us using this fund of yours, this power. I am a free man. I put the mug on the table, so the sound echoed slightly in the silence. Free to leave, Derek, I said evenly. Right now your things true were bought with my money, but I'll gift you the shirt on your back. The exit is there. Nobody is holding you. Freedom is when you have a choice, not just a tongue. He shifted his gaze from me to the door, then to his soapy hands, then to the sink filled to the top with plates. "The collectors are waiting for you there," I added softer but distinctly. "Here is a mother-in-law with a heavy character and work. Here at least is a roof, food, and a chance to settle up. They're unknown." "Choose," he cursed, already in plain text, but through clenched teeth, turned around and turned the water back on, went to scrub harder than before, so foam flew in all directions. I leaned back in the chair. In my chest was a strange sensation, heaviness and relief simultaneously, as if I had sat for a long time, with a tight band on my neck, and it was finally cut. Fresh air isn't customary yet, but already pleasant. The phone on the table beeped. A message arrived. I picked it up, looked from Trayvon. "Mrs. Vance, everything is ready. The fund is registered. Name as you asked. The Dignity Fund. All assets are transferred if, God forbid, something happens to you. On paper, neither son-in-law nor daughter receive anything. Also, regarding your grandmother's display cabinet, found it at a pawn shop on State Street. Bought it back. They will bring it to your home tomorrow by lunch." I felt something straighten out in my chest. Grandmother's cabinet, the very one in which I examined chocolate candies in childhood, was coming home. My property, my memory, my boundaries were slowly returning to their places. I answered briefly, "Thank you, son. Waiting for tomorrow." Put the phone away and looked at the kitchen. Derek was rubbing a plate as if he wanted to erase it from existence, but it only shone brighter. Briana, having smeared mayonnaise on her sleeves, was convulsively wiping forks. The aprons hung on them like alien shells. Outside the window, the city was starting to darken. Headlights crawled along the streets. Upstairs in neighboring windows, other people's lives were lighting up. Somewhere there, people were ordering sushi, drinking wine, posting photos of ideal dinners. In our apartment, the main luxury was hot water from the tap and my patience. I sat in my chair and understood a simple thing. Real control isn't money. Real power is the ability to say no and endure when reproaches, tears, and threats fly at you. I learned this very late, 74 years. Not the age when it is customary to start life anew, but better late than never. The water in the sink rushed, plates clattered. Derek cursed in a whisper from time to time. Briana sobbed but didn't drop the sponge. I took another sip of cold tea and suddenly caught myself smiling. Somewhere deep inside me, where a quiet, beaten-down pensioner had sat for a long time, that same lioness stirred again, the one who once chased inspectors out with a broom. And tomorrow at 6 a.m. she would have a new reason to show that her claws hadn't gone anywhere, neither in the basement of the old building downtown, nor in her own kitchen. 6 months passed since that morning when the sound of a broken plate turned our life upside down. Now the alarm clock stands not in my room but in theirs. At 5:30 I just rolled over onto my side, and from the neighboring bedroom Derek's disgruntled moaning and Brianna's grumbling could already be heard. No more silk robes. Slow stretching until 10. Rise and shine like normal people who must be at the site by 7 o'clock. I got up a little later at 6 o'clock, got dressed, smoothed my hair, and went out into the hallway. In the kitchen, a completely different landscape awaited me than half a year ago. Derek stood at the stove in that same coarse apron, which he once almost called slavish, leaning over a pot, watching so the oatmeal doesn't boil over, stirring carefully, holding the handle with a cloth so as not to burn himself. You can see he isn't used to it, but he tries. Next to him, Briana, without makeup, hair gathered in a ponytail, cuts apples into a bowl. Her hand moves quickly, confidently. On the table lies a notepad with their tasks for today. Not my notes, theirs. "Good morning, Mrs. Vance." Derek greeted me first. No longer old woman, no longer mother-in-law spoken through a lip curl. "Morning," I answered, sitting in my place at the head of the table. Briana placed a bowl of oatmeal before me and neatly laid out the fruit. "I chose them myself, Mama," she said, slightly embarrassed. "Yesterday at the market, I asked them to pick out the ripe ones, not what's on display for beauty." I looked at her hands. No French manicure for unthinkable money. Nails short, clean, flour ingrained around the edges. Yesterday she helped in production. Hands alive, working. "You have 20 minutes for breakfast," I reminded, looking at the wall clock. "At 7 the truck with flour is at the entrance. If you delay unloading again, the supplier will raise the price. Time is also money." Derek nodded without arguing, shoveled a spoon of porridge into his mouth, almost without chewing, washed it down with tea. He has changed noticeably. Cheeks deflated, chin became sharper, and the oval of his face tightened up. Not a tanning bed tan but a normal grayish color of a person who spins all day. Circles under the eyes but not from night partying but from real labor and worries. Don't worry, Mrs. Vance, he said, pushing back the chair. I talked everything through with the new supplier yesterday. If we unload on time, he promised to keep the old price on butter for another quarter. I took him by your method. Keep quiet and watch until he starts fussing himself. I hid a smile in my mug. I'm not a bad teacher after all. Well, see by the invoices, I answered. It's not enough to persuade. You have to check what he signed. That fear that was in them at first slowly turned into discipline. Love might not have grown with us, but respect appeared, and respect feeds more reliably than empty. We love you, Mama, said on the way to a boutique. They finished eating, quickly cleared the dishes, no longer leaving mountains of plates for later. Derek checked the time on his phone, shoved the notepad into his pocket, tied the laces of his work boots on the go. Briana threw on a simple warm jacket, took a bag with papers. We're leaving, she said. You, Mama, don't rush. Come a little later for the inspection. I'll call you when everything is accepted. I know. I nodded. And don't forget, you aren't owners right now. You are managers. People depend on you, and if you screw up, they will have nothing to eat. They went out into the hallway. I heard the front door slam. Steps receding down the staircase. Previously they looked with contempt at those who take the bus. Now they chose the bus instead of a taxi themselves so as not to spend extra. I finished my tea, cleaned up after myself. The habit remained, although now I could have asked. Half an hour later I got ready too. Put on my strict suit, which over these months became my uniform. Took the bag with documents and the blue notebook, called the elevator, went down and got on the crosstown bus. I fundamentally rode together with ordinary people. After all these stories with loans and quick cash, I have a persistent allergy to showy luxury. The building downtown met me with the familiar smell of old brick and fresh baking. Once this building simply brought me rent, quietly dripping into the account. Now life boiled here on the ground floor where some faceless shop with junk used to huddle. Now there were large windows through which you could see a counter with bread and pastries. The sign above the entrance read the Bread Revival Workshop. Under the sign hung a small plaque, a Dignity Fund project. I came up with that myself. Let everyone know that the old lady's money went not only into someone's bling, but into a cause. I went inside. The smell was such that my old confectioner's heart ached sweetly. Warm bread, a little cinnamon, vanilla, coffee. People were taking bags of buns to go. Someone drank tea at a high table. Through the glass partition the production floor was visible. There, in gray aprons, worked the kids. I knew almost everyone by name, half of them from disadvantaged families whom life had already tried to throw into the trash. Derek just at this moment was unloading sacks of flour from the truck. Back wet, face sweating but holding up. Previously heavy for him was a glass of whiskey, now a 50-pound sack. Careful, Derek, I shouted from the door. You'll throw your back out. I'm the one who has to treat you. It's nothing, Mrs. Vance, he called back, not dropping the sack. Worst comes to worst, the fund will support invalid Hollingsworth. He tried to joke, and this time it didn't sound like a mockery but like normal fatigue. At the register stood Briana. In front of her a notebook, calculator, and an old laptop. A short woman in a headscarf approached her. Ours already called her Aunt Lydia. By day she sold pies near the subway, and in the evenings came here to bake. I leased her a corner of the kitchen for funny money, just so she would work humanely, not on her knees. Miss Briana, she addressed her timidly. Look please. Right here in the invoice something doesn't add up for me. They told me to pay for oil like last time, but here the price is $5 higher. I'm straining my eyes. Can't see it myself. Previously, my daughter reacted to such requests with eye rolling. Now she adjusted the glasses on her nose. She ditched contacts. No time for them. Took the paper. Let me look, Aunt Lydia, she said calmly. Look here. They rang up delivery twice for you. Once for the whole batch and again separately. I'll call right now. Have them correct it. And she called without hysterics. Voice even but persistent. Explained that the person here isn't spinning millions but saving pennies. Got the recalculation. Hung up, turned to the woman. That's it, Aunt Lydia. Tomorrow the bill will be lower. They'll deduct that $5. Don't worry. She crossed herself, took Briana's hand with both palms. Thank you, daughter. You are good. Mom and Dad did well. Raised you right. I stood a little to the side so as not to interfere, and listened. Something pricked in my chest, but pleasantly. My princess, who previously considered people like Aunt Lydia service staff, is now called a good girl, and more importantly, she has become one. Slowly, I went up to the mezzanine to the small office with windows overlooking the hall. This is now my observation point. Here stands an old wooden desk, the very one at which I wrote the first plans for the bakery. On the desk are folders with reports, my notepad, and a teapot. A couple of minutes later, Trayvon came up to me in a strict suit, but without pthos, with a folder in his hands. Well, boss, he smiled. Let's see how we are doing. He sat opposite, opened the folder, took out the summary for the week. Revenue is growing, he began. Expenses too, but within plan limits. Most importantly, in these 6 months Derek has paid off about 10% of what he spent on trifles. Little, I said, looking away out the window. But quite honest, if he continues at the same pace, continued Trayvon, in 8 to 10 years, he will be clean debt-free. A person who managed to truly work off such a debt is unlikely to climb into microloans again. Let's pretend we believe it, I chuckled. Just let's keep him slightly hungry in the figurative sense. As soon as he relaxes, he'll drift again. Trayvon closed the folder, looked out the window below. At this time, one of our guys, an apprentice, was showing 2 teenage girls how to neatly cut dough for buns. Derek helped pull a baking sheet out of the oven, and Briana wrote something in a journal. Do you understand, Mrs. Vance? Trayvon said quietly. That from your old lady powerlessness grew all this. That you didn't just save your savings, you raised a whole project, giving people a chance. I nodded silently. The words were pleasant, but I never liked being praised too much. Dangerously relaxing. Okay. I waved it off. Project is a project, but I still have one debtor by my side. I looked down at Derek, who, wiping sweat from his forehead, dragged another sack. He had every reason to quit, slam the door, leave into his habitual freedom. But he hauled sacks and counted dollars, because now the debt wasn't before a faceless bank, but before a specific old woman who knew how to look straight in the eyes and not blink. And I knew the most interesting part was just beginning. At lunch, I went down to our common dining hall. Everyone sat at long tables. Guys from the bakery, apprentices, Aunt Lydia with a jar of her jam. No separate booths, no separate room for management. One kitchen, one soup, one smell of braised cabbage for the whole company. Derek and Briana sat right in the middle of the table with the same metal trays as everyone else. No special plates, no we'll have it without a side, just spoons, bread, and normal working food. I took my portion, ladled soup, a piece of bread, and walked to them. As soon as I sat down, conversations around quietly subsided. Respect, not fear. Everyone just understood. The owner sat down. Derek immediately got up, pulled out a chair for me. Sit down, Mrs. Vance, he said. I'll hold the tray so it doesn't tip. Previously, he didn't carry a tray at all. Everything was done for him. I sat. The soup was ordinary working-ass barley, meat, vegetables, but it tasted like my staff cafeteria used to. Simple, honest food. We ate silently for a couple of minutes. Then Derek cleared his throat, shifted, looked at me, then at Briana. Mrs. Vance, he started cautiously. I was thinking here about something regarding the empty corner space. I raised my eyes. Where that junk shop used to be, he continued. You wanted to give it for storage? I estimated the numbers. If we make a display for direct sales there, not just wholesale but retail, with the flow of people we have in the mornings, we can lift turnover by 20%. I wrote it all out on paper. Cost markup. If you want, I'll show you. He stumbled, took a folded sheet out from under the tray, extended it to me. Paper, not a napkin from a cafe, but a normal calculation, columns, numbers, some notes in the margins, handwriting crooked, but you can see he thought, didn't doodle. I took the sheet, ran my eyes over it. Procurement, rent, approximate flow, even wrote out how much needs to be sold per day to break even. Not a genius, of course, but no longer the person who called roulette investments. I only said, not so stupid, even sensible in places. Derek's eyes lit up, but he restrained himself. If the project goes, he continued, we can put part of the profit toward closing my indebtedness officially on paper, so it's not just words. He fell silent, waiting like a schoolboy at the board. I put the sheet on the table. All right, I nodded. We'll do this. If the numbers are confirmed, if Trayvon checks and says everything is clean, 5% of net profit from this corner goes to the account of your personal debt. Not into the common pot but straight into your column in my notebook, but only from real profit, not projected. His eyes lit up. For real. 5%, he repeated. That's enough for me. That's not for you, I corrected. That is for me. Simply, you will have a chance to pay back faster. Don't confuse it. Briana, until this quiet, suddenly intervened. Mom, what about the design? She looked at Derek. He nodded. Derek said I could be involved. I understand interiors a little. We can make it beautiful but cheap. Simple wood, warm colors, not like in those pretentious cafes but homey. I shifted my gaze to her. In her voice there wasn't the previous bragging. I am an art figure. Spoke calmly to the point. All right, I said. Then this way. By tomorrow morning you two bring me a normal project on paper, estimate, sketch, plan. Not drawings on a napkin but a human variant. Derek answers for numbers, you for the look, and I decide if it is worth me investing in all this at all. Good. Derek nodded seriously. We will make it. We finished eating silently. Then I reached for my tray to take it to the wash, but Derek jumped up. Leave it, Mrs. Vance, he said. I'll take it myself. You need to sit a bit. You have a long day. I stopped and looked at him more attentively. This wasn't that sit down, don't interfere I heard before at home. This was the most ordinary, respectful. You work a lot today. Sit. Difference is huge. I let go of the tray. Derek carried it along with his. On the way, grabbed others' plates. I didn't remember the last time I saw him voluntarily help anyone. I went up to my office upstairs. There, behind the glass, the noise from below sounded different. Not like background noise that tires you, but like its own music. I sat in my chair, turned on the desk lamp, that same old green one, looked down. In the hall, someone laughed at a joke. Someone argued about a recipe. Someone wiped a table. Briana explained something to a young cashier girl, showing how to count change correctly. Her gestures became different, not capricious but businesslike. I closed my eyes for a minute. The noise turned into an even hum like from the ovens at Vance's Southern Suits. Under this sound I always thought best. Otis's face floated up in my head. If he saw all this now, me not on the sofa under a blanket, but at a desk in an office, Derek with a sack of flour, Briana with a calculator. I mentally chuckled. He would say, well, finally, Ketta, you are back in the saddle. I remembered how 6 months ago I stood in the kitchen wiping sauce around a trash can from the floor. How Derek threw my breakfast into that bucket with the words, what are you good for? How my chest was empty and cold then, like in a freezer. If he had just kept quiet then, didn't stage that circus, perhaps I would have remained in my small service corner with the family. Quietly dragged out my old age, sitting in a shawl while they ate through every crumb I earned. Their cruelty became my alarm clock. Loud, unpleasant, but an alarm clock. Sometimes life does that. Hit so hard that breath cuts out just so you finally breathe in with full lungs. I opened the blue notebook to the last pages. Found the column Derek debt. The numbers became a little smaller, 10% he already worked off. Next to it on a clean line I neatly wrote today minus another 1% for initiative and normal work. Then turned the page and at the very top wrote out self-worth restored 100% with interest. Looked at my hands, still the same skin and spots, veins, protruding fingers sometimes ache with the weather. But they no longer tremble from powerlessness. Tremble maybe from anger when I see injustice. That is different. I didn't deprive them of inheritance on paper. No, papers are a cold thing. I deprived them of their habitual position in their heads and mine and theirs. They were masters of life, now employees. They were children who were allowed everything, now adults who bear responsibility. And the strangest thing, precisely in this new position, from below looking up, they became slightly real, as if humans woke up in them when the golden cage was taken away. From below came the clang of an oven door. Someone yelled, "Careful! Hot!" I looked at the watch. The working day was coming to an end. Ahead awaited one more small exam. What to do with what remains uneaten? And there I knew I would not give them a chance to return to old habits. Toward evening we began wrapping up the day. Ovens went out one by one. Noise slowly subsided. Only the smell of fresh bread remained, which eats into the walls so that without it, it feels empty. The guys washed tables, stacked baking sheets. Derek lowered the heavy iron grate at the entrance, clicking locks with already confident movements. Once he only knew how to click a finger on a screen. Now closing a rail lock is also his duty. Briana came out of the production area with a large canvas bag in her hands. Bag stuffed with buns, baguettes, loaves. What didn't sell but was still perfectly good. Stopped at the door, looked at me. "Mama," she asked hesitantly, "should I throw this out or leave it for tomorrow to dry?" I looked at her such that she cut herself off. "Briana," I said quietly but firmly. "In this family, is that even discussed? We never throw away food. Not bread, not soup, not my eggs that were thrown in the trash. You should have learned this long ago." She swallowed, lowered her eyes. "I remember." Nodded. "Then half a year ago when you waved your hand." "Okay, doesn't matter what to do with it." "Just like always," I answered. "Behind the building across the alley there is a shelter, you know. Take the bag and carry it yourself. Not via courier, not via someone else. Personally, look people in the eyes who will eat this bread." "Understood," she said already without arguments. "I'll be quick. Then I'll catch up with you at the subway." Pulled on her jacket, grabbed the bag and went out into the dark entrance. Door quietly slammed. I also went out onto the street to wait. Our building. Downtown stood like an old ship. Saw everything. Survived everything. The air was cold with exhaust with smoke from the nearest food truck. But after a whole day in the warmth of the workshop, even this air seemed invigorating. An older man with a bundle of newspapers under his arm approached us. About 60, cap on the back of his head, gray mustache. I've known him a long time. He sells right at our corner. "Well, goodbye, Mrs. Vance," he said, shifting the stack from hand to hand. "I watch your helpers. Not bad. The kids are quick, not lazy." I involuntarily smiled. "These aren't helpers, Boris," I said. "This is my family," he grunted. "Even better. Good that you took them by the scruff of the neck in time. Otherwise, look, they would also be shuffling through entrances with newspapers. They still have kneading to do," I answered. "The dough was underdone, but slowly it mixes." He nodded, went to his spot. I remained waiting. A couple of minutes later, out of the entrance jumped a breathless Derek. "Here." He shoved a thin rectangle into my hand. "Almost left without a pass, Mrs. Vance. You wanted to pay cash again out of habit." "Old habits?" I chuckled. "Thanks for reminding. Let's go." He looked at the sky there. "Seems like SLE is gathering. Don't want you getting wet under all this." We walked to the subway now. He always walked on the outside, closer to the road, shielding me from puddles from passing cars. Not because I am fragile. I withstood so much in my life, but because now he understood I am not a burden. I am the very person, thanks to whom he generally has somewhere to go. At the station, as usual at rush hour, it was crowded. We entered the car like sardines in a can. People tired, everyone in their phone. No one looking at anyone. I grabbed the handrail, prepared to stand. Derek looked around, saw that I barely fit between two music lovers in headphones, jerked the shoulder of some kid about 20 who sat sprawling. "Man," he said calmly but firmly, "give up the seat to the boss, please. She's been on her feet all day." The guy looked at me, at Derek, then somehow immediately gathered himself and got up. "Sure, sorry," he mumbled. I sat carefully, moving my cane so as not to hit anyone. Derek stood next to me, holding the handrail over my head. He looked as if he was personally pulling this train car. At the next station, Briana squeezed inside, cheeks pink, hair disheveled. On her jacket, traces of flour and wet snow spots. Saw us, smiled, tired but sincerely. "Made it." She exhaled, gave everything away. "There are so many people at the shelter, children." They took the bread instantly, said, "Thank you." One boy pressed a bun to his nose and said, "Smells like a holiday." She said this and unexpectedly for herself sniffled, but not pitifully, but somehow humanly. "It's nothing," I answered calmly. "Let someone have a holiday at least from leftovers, just not in the dumpster." We all three rode like that. I sat. They stood on the sides holding the handrail like guards for a general. Only the general was in an old coat and with a cane. I looked at them. In Derek, the habitual bravado still lived. Sometimes some phrase slipped through that made you want to roll your eyes. Briana's hands from time to time reached for windows with beautiful things. But the main thing changed. They stopped living at someone else's expense as if it were natural. They began to breathe and sweat together with me. Not parasites, but however you twist it, comrades in the same boat. The train swayed slightly. We entered a dark section of the tunnel. Light in the car became harsher, faces around paler. I closed my eyes for a second, listened to the measured clatter of wheels. In my head floated Derek's phrase, thrown that morning. "Kitchen, what are you even good for, old woman?" Then it pierced me like a knife. I walked with this wound like with a hole in my chest. And now, in this overcrowded car, with a cane between my knees, and with the smell of bread, which haunts me even in the subway anyway, the answer suddenly became very simple. I felt the weight of keys in my bag from the apartment, from the building downtown, from the warehouse. Heard how below me on papers and in fact stands my name. Knew that there in the workshop people wait for me who turn at my voice. Saw out of the corner of my eye Derek's straight back and Briana's hands, on which now are not only rings but small scars from baking sheets and knives. What am I good for, old woman? Yes, at least for this, to lead, to teach, to put in place, to straighten crooked paths while there is still strength, and to remind everyone around, both them and myself, that no one has the right to turn a living person into a trash basket. Not for age, not for weakness, not for the habit of silence. I am needed so that every day while I breathe, someone nearby remembers the price of bread. The real one, from flour and water, and that which is metaphorical: respect, labor, dignity. The train emerged from the tunnel onto an open section. Into the windows poured warm sunset light, painted the car orange, pink. I opened my eyes. Ahead of us were bills, debts, fatigue, new conflicts. Life didn't go anywhere and didn't become easier. Simply now in this life, I was again not extra, not old one who gets in the way, but the captain of a small but sturdy ship. And as long as I have a bunch of keys in my hands, a solid floor under my feet, and fire in the ovens, no age and no children can shove me back into the corner. Let them try.